Hi readers, today we are beginning chapter 9 today of The Lemonade War. It's crazy to think how quickly we've gotten through this book, but it just goes to show if you read just one chapter a day, how quickly you can get through a book and how much you can be engaged and interested in what's happening in our book. And I know last week we talked about how we might be feeling about Evan and Jesse and their situation, especially since Jesse is getting really close to Megan. And we know that Evan and Megan were friends. They're both in 4th grade, and now Jesse is in their class as well. So in chapter 9, I'm kind of hoping to see if Evan is going to tell Jesse how much money he made, because remember, he did the lemonade war on the lawn in the middle of his town that he lived in, and he made so much money. He ended up with $103. And we found out last chapter that Jesse won $104. So just one more dollar than Evan. However, Jesse is kind of in a sticky situation because Megan had offered to give Jesse her money to donate with Jesse's money to the animals. And so Jesse has to debate and decide, does she want to say that she made a total of $208 or just the money that she made? Okay, so chapter 9 is called Negotiation, and here is our definition. Negotiation, a method of bargaining so that you can reach an agreement. Evan looked up from the marble track he was building when Jessie walked in the front door. She looked hot. She looked sweaty. She looked happy, really happy, like she'd just gotten an A+ or something, or like she won the war. "What are you smiling for?" asked Evan, holding a marble at the top of the track. "No reason," Jessie said, putting her hands on her hips and staring at Evan. She looked like one of those goofy yellow smiley faces, all mouth. "Well, quit looking at me, would you? It's creepifying. You look like you're about to explode or something." Evan dropped the marble into the funnel. It raced through the track, picking up speed, around the curves. It passed the flywheel, sending the flags spinning, then fell into a final drop. When it reached the end of the track, it went sailing through the air like a beautiful silver bird, and fell short. The marble landed on the ground instead of in the bullseye cup. Evan muttered under his breath and adjusted the position of the cup. "Raise the end of the track," said Jessie. "You'll get a lot more lift." Evan looked at her angrily. The marble had fallen into the cup at least 10 times when he'd done it. Why did it have to fall short when she was watching? "Don't tell me what to do," he said. Why was she smiling like that? "I didn't tell you what to do," she said. "I just made a suggestion. Take it or leave it." She turned to walk and go upstairs. Evan threw a marble at her, disappearing back, but missed it by a mile. Well, he hadn't really been aiming anyway. He just wanted that feeling of throwing something. He'd been feeling the need to throw something for the past 4 days. Has anybody else felt like that? Like you just get so frustrated that you just feel like you have to throw something? Well, we never want to throw something at people or animals or anything else that's important and matters to somebody or us. But sometimes it is okay to take our anger out in other ways. You know, we can always punch a pillow. That's damage-free. Or we can find other ways to get our anger out of our bodies without causing damage to people, animals, or things. Hey, nouns. Don't cause any damage to any noun out there. All right. Where was I? Grumster Fink was a man who was cranky and mean and made everybody miserable. But deep down he wanted to love people and people to love him. It's just that every time he tried to do something nice, it turned out all wrong. Evan had felt like Grumster Fink. It was the name of a character technically he'd made up when he was 6 and Jesse was 5. That was back when Mom and Dad were fighting a lot and Evan and Jesse had just got out of the treehouse. They'd scrambled up the climbing tree. Evan had his branch, Jesse had hers, and waited out. Sometimes they'd had to wait a long time, and once Jesse was thirsty and impatient and cranky, Evan said, Be quiet and I'll tell you a story about Grumster Fink. Evan had made up a lot of stories about Mr. Fink in that tree, but after Dad left, there just weren't any more stories to tell. No one in the whole world besides Jessie and Evan knew about Grumster Fink, and Evan hadn't thought about him in years. "Hey," he said sharply. He heard Jessie stop at the top of the stairs and whispered Grumster Fink again. "Do you want to call this whole thing off?" he asked. "What?" she shouted. This lemonade war. Call it off?" "Yeah," he said. Just say nobody wins and nobody loses." Evan looked at her. He missed her. He had spent the whole day, the third of the last, before school, by himself. It stunk. It totally stunk. If Jessie had been around, they hadn't been fighting with each other. They could have played air hockey or made pretzels or built a marble track with twice as many gizmos that launched the marble into the bullseye cup every time. Jessie was very precise. She was good at getting the marble into the cup. "What do you say?" he asked. Jessie looked puzzled. "I don't know," she said, frowning. "You see, Megan, well, she—" Evan's face got hot. Megan Moriarty. Every time he thought of her, his throat got all squeezed up and scratchy. It was like an allergic reaction. "You told Megan Moriarty about everything?" he asked. "No, well, what everything?" asked Jessie. Evan thought she looked like a fish caught in a net. "You did." And suddenly Evan knew exactly why Jessie had been smiling when she walked into the door, and why she didn't want to call off the war. She'd done it again. Again! She figured out some way to show the world how stupid he was, like the time he'd come home with 100% on his test for his spelling quiz, the only time he'd ever gotten every word right, to find out that Jessie had won a statewide poetry writing contest. He'd thrown his paper into the trash without even telling his mom. What was the point? Evan didn't know how, but somehow Jessie had found a way to earn more than $103. She was going to beat him, and Megan Moriarty knew all about it. And she would have to tell everybody else. All the girls would know. Paul would know, and Ryan, and Adam, and Jack. Scott Spencer would know. "Can you believe it?" he would say to his little sister. "He lost. The one who's going to be in our class. What a loser." "You know what?" he said, pushing past her. "Forget it. Just forget I said anything. The war is on. O-N. And that concludes chapter 9. Wow. Okay, so we're getting more information about this war that they're in, and we're kind of figuring out that Evan was really being a good sport almost and wanting to call it off to become friends with his sister again. But once he found out that possibly Jessie had told Megan, which as far as we know, she didn't tell her, he decided that it's back on and he was guaranteed he wanted to win. So let's find out tomorrow in chapter 10 what happens. There is a read aloud response form for today, so make sure you click that and fill that out as well. I'd love to hear your thoughts about what we just read about.